a world where women ran half our institutions would be just a much better world.
스테레오타입에서 이제 갇혀있지 않은 시대잖아요. 하지만 이것들을 그 순간순간 지혜롭게 극복해 나가다 보면
once you find this inner calling, there's nobody that can stop you from doing what you want to do.
I think it's a wonderful program. It helps me understand how to engage more people on Facebook and how to extend not just to India but to a worldwide audience. Women can come together and kind of understand that there is solidarity in what we're doing right now.
Hey, women, come on, go start leading, go start building for yourself. And if Facebook says that, then it just becomes even more amplified.
Coming to the edge, running on the water. 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 Running to the edge,
It really doesn't help when we do nothing at all. Be the people who will lead the way. Raise your voices, start today. Whoa, whoa, there's trouble in the world, there is no denying. Whoa, whoa, you know that too many people are dying. Gonna change the world, gonna change the world, gonna change the world. Come on, people, get together. Hey, hey, hey. Whoa, whoa, there's trouble in the world, there is no denying. Whoa, whoa, too many people are crying, dying. Gotta make some changes, gotta make some changes, gotta make some changes in the world. Whoa, changes in the world today.
The song of mine will wind its music around you like a fond arms of love. The song of mine will carry your sight into the heart of things like a faithful star in a dark night over your road.
My song will be like a pair of white wings to your dreams, like a fond arms of
when my voice is silent, my song will live in
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the exceptionally talented Nagaland Chamber Choir. Thank you to them. Thank you to them for this beautiful opening on this very momentous day, for reminding us about the bravery of women and for asking us to look at the world in a new way. Good morning, Mumbai, and welcome to the Economic Times Women's Forum. I am Ira Dubey, your host for the day. Some of you may not know me. Some of you might remember me from my last film, Dear Zindagi, or my theatre work, including Girish Karnad's wedding album, which has completed 300 shows across the world, or my one-woman show, 9 Parts of Desire, which has toured the world. Thank you. Thank you once again, all of you, for making it today, for joining us. The Economic Times Women's Forum is a celebration of Indian women, their talent, their successes, their resilience, their potential, and their promise. The true power of 500 million. It has been created in partnership with Facebook. When I think of women achievers, the first person that comes to my mind is, of course, my own mother. More than 3 decades ago, she went against all the odds of academics, education, society, and her family, and decided to start a theatre company. Today, she travels the world with her work. I have been surrounded by strong, fiercely independent women all my life. I think women can do anything, everything. Without much further ado, I'd like to begin the proceedings for today. I do have to make a housekeeping announcement, and this time it's not to ask you to switch off the mobile phones, but to keep them on silent mode, because I would be very happy if you would keep checking in on Facebook and tag us at hashtag ET Women's Forum. This is the first year ever. Welcome again to Economic Times Women's Forum. Our inaugural address this morning is by a leading international lawyer, a committed campaigner for women's rights. She is the founder of the Cherie Blair Foundation, which operates in 23 countries and runs online mentoring programs in over 100. Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to welcome Cherie Blair.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for that kind introduction. How marvelous it is to be in the company of ambitious, inspiring women and to start the day with a song. It's my privilege to be here with you today. India is a country very close to my heart. There is truly nowhere like it anywhere else in the world. Vibrancy and entrepreneurialism are everywhere, and it has a boundless energy that plays a huge part in India's incredible rise as a geopolitical and economic powerhouse. But I'm here with you this morning to discuss a critical stumbling block. As I'm sure you may know, India has one of the lowest rates of female labour force participation in the world. It's the lowest in South Asia, with the exception of Pakistan. According to the ILO, less than a third of Indian women 15 years or older are working or actively looking for a job. India's female labour force participation rate is uniquely low for all levels of education, with 65% of Indian women with college degrees out of work. To make a comparison, in Bangladesh, 41% of women graduates are out of work, and in Indonesia, it's only 25%. So what does this mean? It means that India has a precious opportunity that it's overlooking and underutilizing. And that opportunity is the boundless potential of Indian women as business owners, as job creators, and as leaders in their communities. The statistics on women's economic empowerment in India make for disappointing reading. But we must remember that women are so much more than one-dimensional statistics. The ability, energy, and promise is there. And I can look out in this audience and I can see it. As industry leaders, as influencers, as change makers here in this room, you are helping to lay the groundwork for other women to follow. Because the truth is that progress on gender equality is unacceptably slow the whole world over. The World Economic Forum's latest Gender Gap Index revealed that inequality between men and women is growing, particularly in economic participation. In fact, it's estimated that women will have to wait 217 years to enjoy full economic parity. To my mind, that's 216 too many. Despite this bleak prediction, I remain an eternal optimist. I truly believe that we are at a tipping point in women's history, one where our voices are becoming increasingly synchronized on issues which unite us. As campaigns like Me Too and Time's Up are showing, our collective cries of enough is enough are starting to echo their ways up the corridors of power. Many of you know I'm a lawyer by trade, and the fundamental value that has guided my life and career in human rights law is the belief that everyone has the right to participate equally in their societies and their communities. I'm particularly passionate about gender equality, partly because of the way I was raised. I grew up in an ordinary working-class family in Liverpool in the north of England. But I was so lucky to be born at a time when opportunities were opening up for women. Opportunities that my grandma and my mother never had. My mother and grandmother were very aware of the opportunities that they missed out because they both left school at the age of 14. So they were determined that my sister and I would have the best education. It was actually my grandmother who got me first interested in the law because there was a very famous woman barrister that was very rare in those days, and she came from Liverpool. And she used to appear in our local courts, and her name was Rose Heilbronn, QC. And my grandma used to go to the public gallery of the courts and watch her. And she'd come home and tell me about this incredible woman. And I loved hearing those stories. And I worked hard at school and ended up the first person in my entire family to go to university. But you know, it's not enough just to educate a woman. She also needs the opportunity to put that learning into good use. Now, I started out as a young lawyer in 1976. That was a landmark year for me, but it was also for the legal profession in the UK, because it was the first time the number of women called to the bar reached double figures. But frankly, the culture at the time was deeply sexist. It was standard for firms to tell young female lawyers that we just don't take women. And the most progressive firms might say, oh yes, we do take a woman, but I'm afraid we've already got one, and we couldn't possibly take another. And at the time, one of the leading textbooks said that women weren't suited to being advocates because their voices weren't loud enough. I'm afraid I disproved that theory. Education opened up all sorts of amazing opportunities for me, and that's why I feel so passionate about making education a reality for every single woman and girl across the world. But there was another key event in my upbringing that influenced how I saw my place in the world. After my father left us when I was 8 years old, my mother and grandmother were the ones who had to support the family. And so I soon realized how important it was for women to be financially independent. Because when a woman is able to make and control her own money, she can make the decisions about her life and about the lives of her children. And this insight was reinforced during my time at number 10 Downing Street, when I was lucky enough to travel the world. And I met countless women in India and beyond who were striving to set up businesses to create better lives for themselves and their families. Yet these women faced a huge number of legal and cultural barriers. But you know, despite these hurdles, they weren't going to take no for an answer. And their courage and their determination was truly inspiring. I realized that with the right support and the right tools, these women could go on to achieve amazing things, not just for themselves, but for their families and their communities too. And that's why in 2008, I established the Cherie Blair Foundation for Women to support women entrepreneurs in the developing and emerging economies, precisely because I knew the barriers for women in these countries are so much higher. To date, we've supported 140,000 women from over 100 countries, whether they're based in Kigali or Kampala. All these women are strong, resilient, and creative. And it's fantastic to see growing acknowledgement of the power and potential of women entrepreneurs here in India. Just last year, I was speaking on a panel at the Global Entrepreneurship Summit in Hyderabad, where the theme was Women First, Prosperity for All. And I'm constantly reminded of the truth of this statement by the stories of the women that we support. Women like Hiresha from Uttarakhand, who took part in her We Can India project with the US Embassy in India and Dhriti. Hiresha owns a mushroom farming enterprise and has trained over 1,000 women in mushroom farming. She also buys produce from around 250 village-level mushroom cultivators. 150 of these were women she originally trained, who now have steady income from their work. Or take Ramita from Delhi, who also took part in our We Can India project. She survived an acute disease in her childhood, and she has dedicated her life to health. So she founded an online platform to build and sell medical devices effectively, efficiently, and ethically. Since taking part in We Can India, she has gone on to win a PayU Inspiring Woman Entrepreneur Award. Like these women, everyone in this room has the power to make a difference. Regardless of your sector or sphere, here are a few guiding principles that I think you could all apply to unleash that power of this amazing 500 million. Be the change you wish to see in the world. I firmly believe in this saying. Many of you in the room this morning will benefit from having unique platforms and positions of influence. I know I have. Using these tools to create positive social change is not just important, it is imperative. We all have a responsibility to give back. If you're a creative professional, think, how can you harness your talents to improve the way women are depicted in the media? Consider, how can you use your platform to reach decision makers? If you're a CEO, be proactive in recruiting a diverse board, which includes women and other underrepresented minorities. Make tackling the pay gap or unfair conditions your priority. Support other women. Madeleine Albright once famously said, "There's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women." It's so true. Create supportive, professional networks for women in your sector and in your workplace. Listen, learn, and share with one another. Celebrate and elevate each other. Hire one another. Investing in women is often the best investment you can make because empowered women empower others. For example, in my foundation's online mentoring program, 80% of our mentees pass on what they've learned to others, and 50% of them go on to become mentors themselves. Number 3, think inclusive and act inclusive. The feminist author and activist Audre Lorde once wrote, "I am not free while any woman is unfree, even when her shackles are very different from my own." While there are challenges we all share as women, there are so many differences as well in our experiences. That's why it's so important that we push for a diversity of women's voices to be heard. We are not all the same. For example, women with disabilities, women from marginalized communities, LGBT women, women from different socio-economic backgrounds. Are these voices being considered within your sphere of influence? It's important that when we think, talk, and act on gender, we also go beyond gender. Which takes me to number 4. Enlist male allies. Now, this might be the hardest feat on the list, and I'm very glad to see a scattering of brave men in this room. But you know, the reality is, men are often the gatekeepers of power. They are often the source of many of the challenges we face as women. So they must be a part of the solution. And men can play an incredibly positive role in pushing for change. At this year's World Economic Forum in Davos, Bollywood superstar Shah Rukh Khan proclaimed that gender inequality was primitive and stupid. Last night, our host spoke of his daughter's experience. Believe me, the daughters of many men are our most powerful weapon. More men need to understand how rigid patriarchal norms and the toxic masculinity hinders everyone. Everyone. It stops both men and women from being able to reach their full potential or to live emotionally fulfilled and rounded lives. I'm sure that many of you are already doing so much to celebrate and advance women in your own lives and communities. We must continue our fight until our gender no longer limits our opportunities for ourselves and for the generations to come. Something I feel even more passionately about now that I'm a grandmother myself. It's been a real pleasure and honor to be here with you in this room full of amazing, dynamic people, most of them women, and who are all committed to unleashing that full power of 500 million. I am so excited to see what the future holds for India's women and for women all over the world. I know that you're going to have a fantastic rest of the day, and I look forward to sharing it with you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Cherie Blair. Thank you, Cherie, for that enlightening and very inspiring address, scattered with your own personal journey and with so much insight from what your wonderful foundation is doing. Our next speaker is a former CEO of Avon, where she was the longest-serving CEO of a Fortune 500 company. She is currently the president and CEO of Grameen America, where she works to support women and their families across the country through microloans, training, and community networks. She is also on the board of General Electric and Apple. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome Andrea Jung.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so honored to have been invited to participate in this inaugural Women's Forum at this quite auspicious time in this extraordinary country. Cherie, just to be following you, I'm very humbled. I've been able to cross paths with Cherie Blair many times over our careers in the past, and I'm just honored all the way across the ocean to be able to share the stage with her and listen to her inspirational words. So I hope to share a little bit of my journey as a woman who's been able to break through that CEO glass ceiling, very importantly as a proud Asian, and also someone who's spent some time understanding both at Avon and today at Grameen the real power and the impact of women's entrepreneurship. In my own personal journey, what you don't read in my bio are a couple of things. I am the proud daughter of Chinese immigrants. I grew up in a very traditional Asian household with all that comes with that, as I'm sure all of you know. Culturally, that mom and dad, my tiger mother. I'm also the product of a microloan, which most people don't know. My grandparents came from China, and when they got off the boat in America, they spoke not a word of English, had no money, they were clearly in poverty, and my grandmother, not my grandfather, was able to access a small microloan. There was no Grameen at the time, but she accessed a microloan. She knew how to cut hair, and so she started a little salon. One generation later, my father went to MIT. 2 generations later, yeah, 2 generations later, you can read my bio and my Wikipedia page, but it is all from that very, very important privilege of 2 generations ago, a hand up. Not a handout, a hand up to a woman that can dimensionally change the life of a family, and I am living proof of it. I'm also a huge, passionate woman about the power of women and the empowerment of the 500 million here and the billions around the world. One of my favorite statements was my friend Mukhtar Kent, the chairman and former CEO of Coca-Cola, when he said that the most powerful emerging market in the world is not a country, If it were a country, it would be right here where we're standing. But the most powerful emerging market in the world is not a country. The most powerful emerging market in the world is women. Yes? Women are still disadvantaged. They are still underserved. They do not receive the same financial capital. In the United States, $1 out of $23, 4% of dollars going to entrepreneurship in the United States of America in 2016 went to women, 4%. Hard to believe. But when we look at healthcare, when we look at education, equal pay, it is 78 cents on a dollar for the same job in the United States of America. That is up 1 penny from 77 cents several years ago, but it is still 78 cents on a dollar. So to equalize this, like Cherie, I believe it is the world's biggest game changer. McKinsey actually did a report, and they said that closing this gender gap, this wage gap, this societal gap, would add $28 trillion to the world's GDP by 2025, $28 trillion. So it's mathematics, women, and then here it's just simple math. It's the only way for societal progress. As an Asian American, I faced a lot of interesting things on my journey. I'll tell you a little bit about it, but I can tell you that 25 years ago, even when I had risen all the way to the top, I would walk into rooms in the US, Asia, Latin America, and Europe, and often people would say to me, expecting not a young 39-year-old Asian American woman, they would say, why don't you just wait here, and when your bosses come, we'll start the meeting. And I very nicely and respectfully had to say, that's fine, we can wait for them, but I am the boss. So life has changed, progress is getting better, and I am a believer that the glass is half full. When I graduated from college and started my career, I felt like I had to make a choice between doing good and purposeful work and getting a job. I actually wanted to go to the Peace Corps, and my parents told me, that's very nice, we admire your desire to serve, but you need to pay back those loans and you need to get a real job. So when I finally, years later, got to Avon in the early 90s, I found, luckily, that life could combine both, and that it was a company that, in fact, had a legacy of empowering women for centuries. Just a few minutes on Avon, because most people think of Ding Dong, the Avon lady, lipsticks and skin cream, but actually in 1886, 34 years before women could vote in the United States of America, the prescient founder of Avon, who was a man named David H. McConnell, believed that there was an opportunity not only to sell cosmetics, but to have women as the sellers, and this was way before they could vote. He was an encyclopedia salesman. All direct sellers at the time in America were men. He went door to door selling encyclopedias, and one holiday someone gave him a little vial of perfume and said, maybe the women will want to buy all of those volumes if you give them a free perfume with the purchase. So when he knocked on those doors, two things. The women said, we don't want the books, can we just get the perfume? We'll pay for it. And number two, can we sell? And so again, 34 years before the right to vote, he gave women the opportunity to earn economic income apart from their husbands. It was rather heretical at the time. Many were against it. But therein began what was a revolution of women's economic independence. And so 140 countries later and 7 million Avon ladies later, that really was the legacy of the company. I had no idea I would become the CEO when I joined. There were no role models. There were no women in the Fortune 500 who were CEOs. But I do remember that I interviewed with, and now here is an industry of cosmetics where 95+% of the consumers were women and men were still leading the company. 8 CEOs, all men. But the CEO that I interviewed with for a middle management marketing job had a plaque behind his desk, and it had 4 footprints in the sand. And the first footprint was of a barefoot ape, and the second footprint was a barefoot man. The third footprint was a wingtip shoe, and the fourth footprint was a high-heeled pump. And the plaque said, the evolution of leadership, and this was in the early 90s. And I didn't even have the job yet. And I remember asking him, do you really believe that? That's quite a prescient and incredible plaque. And he said to me, you know, we sell cosmetics. All of our Avon ladies are out there all over the world. Someday we should be one of the first companies to have a woman CEO. I had no idea. I didn't even have the marketing job yet. But 6 years later, when I did get the job, after he had retired, a package came to my office, wrapped in paper with a big bow, and it was the plaque. And to this date, it sits behind my desk. I had the greatest opportunity to lead at a time when I was only one of 3 women CEOs at the time. That, by the way, 3 out of 500 rounds down to 0%. But it was an extremely interesting opportunity because I remember taking the job on, and my father was interviewed by Dan Rather, a television journalist, who wanted to understand if my parents ever knew and always knew that I would become a CEO. And quite to the contrary, on national television, I recall him saying, absolutely not. I raised her as a very traditional Asian daughter with a lot of respect, and my perception of CEOs in the corner office are cutthroat men who fire people, and I just don't see the fit. And I remember thinking, this is national TV, Dad. How could you be saying that? But of course, in many ways, he was right, because I didn't want to have to change who I was. I needed to learn to be far more assertive. The job is a tough one, but not aggressive. I needed to learn how to still be humble, to still have compassion, to never lose the sense of integrity, yet make those very hard calls that are part of the CEO job. So it's really kind of balancing that, staying who I was, and yet being able to really operate and win in a man's world. But when you look at it today, there is progress. So again, when I was a CEO, there were 3 out of 500. Today, in the Fortune 500, there are 32 women. That rounds up now to 6%, which is better than 0, but that is 20 years, okay? 20 years later, not acceptable. It is still only 6%. I am encouraged, though. I am an optimist because I think the glass is half full, in that the women leading these companies, they are large companies. You have Mary Barra, the CEO of General Motors, the first woman to lead a completely male-dominated industry in the automotive world. You have Indra Nooyi at Pepsi. You have Ginny Rometty at IBM. And if you had asked me, even when I first became the CEO, if 3 out of the 4 accounting public major firms would be led by women, I would have said, not in my career, not in my lifetime, and that is true today. So while the ceiling is not shattered, I think there are some very big cracks, particularly when I look at the level below. When I grew up in the business, a woman was the head of HR. She was the head of public affairs, communications, and maybe marketing. But no women were in charge of the largest P&Ls, or the CFO, or the general counsel, or in those jobs that were readying you to walk into the CEO job. That's really different today. You've got Ruth Porat at Google, one of the most powerful CFOs who could run any company. And all of these jobs running major P&Ls are ripe with a very full pipeline. So I think the next 10 years are going to look very different than the last 10, and I am hugely encouraged. When you look at boards, 20 years ago, again, when I started and when I became CEO, it was less than 10% representation in the Fortune 500. 20 years later, it is almost 20%, double, but still glacial pace. Interesting because I'm on the board at Daimler, a European company, a wonderful, prestigious automotive manufacturer. And as you know, in Europe, the EU mandate, and then Angela Merkel's mandate in Germany of 30% of women on boards and in management has taken that glacial pace and seen an acceleration that I would have never believed had it not been for legislation. So I, who would have thought that perhaps that wasn't necessary, got to see and have seen firsthand not just women to check a box, but extraordinarily qualified women. This is a country that used to say only 10% of women are graduating as engineers, so how could we possibly fill the pipeline in management with 30%? And yet it's been done with qualified women, so there is hope. I know here in India, it's mandatory that all companies have one woman on the board. That is progress. It's a good start. It's not the end. because I can tell you from experience, having been the only woman on boards for many of my years, it's not enough. There is strength in numbers. So one is a start, one is not enough. But the gender gap is not just a gap in the boardroom or in the C-suite. It really still permeates, unfortunately, so many levels of society. I have spent the last 4 years at Grameen. I had the unbelievable opportunity to be on a panel, maybe in 2007, I think, with Muhammad Yunus and several other CEOs, and I was inspired by the work that he and the Grameen Bank had done in Bangladesh to really literally help take that country out and up of poverty by eliminating half of the poverty through the empowerment of half of the country's population. And that microfinance program and microcredit, which has spawned a complete industry, has done more to help enable women get financial inclusion. He talked about 40 plus years ago when he would go out into the villages when the traditional banks were not giving women loans. And he said it was very difficult in the beginning because they would go out and try and give loans to women, and they would come back saying, maybe we should just give it to the men because the women are basically saying, you know what, I don't understand the language of finance, give the loan to my husband. And they would go back out and say, no, that is history and society speaking, that is not your voice. You have every bit as much entrepreneurial DNA. And so if you have a chicken, buy a chicken, it lays eggs, you sell those eggs, you pay us back. You have now established credit. Credit is a basic human right for women as well as men. And that, in fact, has spawned great progress, not only in Bangladesh, but all around the world. Many thought it wasn't possible to have microfinance be successful in the United States. We are 10 years now in the United States. We've served over 100,000 families. The repayment rate on non-collateral, no-recourse loans is 99.6%. Microcredit programs all over the world have proven that women repay those loans sometimes up to 40 points better repayment than men. The primary reason is that men access other capital. It is one of many loans. There's not the loyalty or the gratitude. For women, that dollar, it has been proven country after country, when a woman earns a dollar, that dollar goes back to her family, to education, to health, and to society as a whole. So it has been a brilliant opportunity to see firsthand. Sometimes people say, lipsticks to microcredit, it must be very different. But giving you a little bit of the context, it really is kissing cousins, and I feel very blessed to have been able to work in women's empowerment for all these years. Let me just end with a few of the words that people have said to me, some of the advice I have been given. So these aren't mine. These have been mentors and advisors who have really helped me on that journey all these 20 years, in the hopes that perhaps it can inspire you or that it would help you as you journey forward. The first was, I had a woman tell me, follow your compass, not your clock. When you listen to my bio or you read it, it sounds like everything was straight up the trajectory and I got that CEO job at a very young age. But actually, 2 years before I became the CEO, I was promised the job, and the board took a different direction. They decided that at 38 years old, I wasn't ready because I hadn't been a CEO, but how can you be a CEO if no one gives you the chance? And they put a CEO male from the board into the role. And there was a big expose about that in the New York Times that said there's a glass ceiling, women can't get to the top. And from that article, I was actually offered 2 CEO jobs. And this mentor of mine said, but you love Avon, you love what it's about. You were never all about just getting the title in the corner office. Follow your compass, not just your clock. Do what's in your heart, not just in your head. It's a long journey, and you have to have passion for work. Life is too short. There's no great life without great work, and there's no great work without great purpose and passion. So I stayed. I turned those jobs down. 17 months later, he did not succeed. He failed in the job, and I got the job and became the 9th CEO and the first woman. And the rest is history, but I did follow my compass, not my clock, and it made all the difference, not just in my work, but in my life. The second piece of advice I was given, which I think I tell young people all the time, this is a world where industries are getting disrupted overnight. And you have to reinvent your companies or your businesses. But people are the reinvention. Companies can't reinvent themselves. Only leaders can reinvent. So the advice I got was the following. Fire yourself on Friday evening and then rehire yourself on Monday. If you lost your job on Friday and they brought in someone new on Monday morning, would he or she do something different? Would he or she look at your very same role with fresh eyes, be able to walk away from those sacred cows, look at things that perhaps you've become a little stayed in because you've been there a long time? That's what a new person would do. But if you can do that, because you've got all the experience and all the history, then you will constantly not only reinvent yourself, but you'll be the catalyst to reinvent your business, small or large, even if you decide to leave it and go to another industry. That constant forcing of self-reinvention is one of the tools and one of the most salient pieces of advice that I have gotten in my career. The third I got from my very good friend Steve Jobs at Apple before he died. I had the pleasure of working with him for several years, and he said to me 2 words: fail forward. Everybody talks about Apple and all of the extraordinary successes. It's the #1 market cap company in the world. But they have made many mistakes, and they are proud of some of their mistakes, because from each of those mistakes, they learned, they got better, and some of the biggest successes came from some of the biggest mistakes. If you're not making mistakes, he used to say, then you're not bold enough, you're not courageous enough, and you're not innovative enough. If you make the same mistake twice, or don't use that as a learning opportunity for your whole team and your whole company, then shame on you. But if you make a mistake and can learn from it, the biggest successes will follow. So fail forward. Fourth piece of advice, do good, not just do well. That it's a long journey. It's not just about profits and shareholders in business. Yes, they are important, but they are only one constituent. If you can find work that has purpose, if you can find work and do good at the same time in the company or on the side, we can't wait for government. We as individual leaders have to take the reins and have to make a difference socially as well as business-wise. So make sure you do good as well as do well. And then finally, last but not least, be the first, but never be the last. People used to say to me, it's wonderful that you've been the first woman in your family to make it that far, or you're the first Asian American to become a CEO in the Fortune 500. But I always say to myself, so what good would that be if I was the last? What good would it be? And that is, I guess, the purpose of this forum, of all of you sitting here this morning and throughout this day, is that it is upon all of us to make sure that people stand on our shoulders, that we are, if we're the first, definitely not the last. So I leave you with 3 questions. If not here, then where? If not India, I mean, the world is betting on India. You are making such extraordinary change at a dizzying pace. So on this issue of powering the $500 million, on all of these issues that still remain in terms of women's empowerment, fix it here. You can do it faster than anybody else. If not here in India, then where? If not when? If not now, when? I don't want to see my daughter or your daughters or our granddaughters have to deal with the same things. As each of us walk out of here, it's just in the little actions. Every time you hire somebody, every time you promote somebody, are you paying that woman the same amount as the men in your companies, big or small? And in those little actions of every single one of us, that is where progress comes. We don't need laws, but we need to walk out of here. It's absolutely unacceptable, and the time is now. So if not now, then when? And finally, if not us, then who? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you to Andrea for being such a pathbreaker, for sharing her story and her wisdom with such warmth, such intelligence, and such compassion. I'm sure many of us resonated with a lot of what she said. given that we are born in this country and we travel and we succeed abroad as well as here. Our first session this morning, ladies and gentlemen, from entrepreneurship and a more global perspective, is women in politics, creating a balance of power. May I invite on stage our session moderator, Bodhisattva Ganguly, Executive Editor, The Economic Times. Welcome, Bodhi. Spokesperson for the BJP and a well-known political commentator, she made her mark as a spokesperson for the India Against Corruption movement led by Anna Hazare in 2011 and 2012. Please welcome a round of applause for Shazia Ilmi. She is advisor to the AAP government and oversees the Mohalla Sabha project for decentralization for the Delhi government. She is an alumnus of St. Stephen's College and a Rhodes Scholar. May I welcome Atishi Marlena. Completing the panel on women in politics, a new balance of power, is Cabinet Minister for Sports and Youth Welfare, Religious Trusts and Endowment for the BJP government in Madhya Pradesh. 3 terms MLA and 2 terms Lok Sabha member, she is the first woman to hold the industries portfolio in the state. Please welcome Yashodhara Raje Scindia. Over to you, Bodhi.
Thank you so much. Since this is a somewhat short session, so I'll come back, in fact, straight to the point. Though I can't help pointing out, I've actually moderated many discussions in this in the Regal room, and needless to say, for obvious reasons, both the audience and the panel is unusual. Let's put it this way. Not. Thank you. So I'll ask her, in fact, some of these
Can I ask the first question? Why is it unusual?
Because, as I said, for obvious reasons, because of the theme of the summit.
Do we settle a gender bias here?
No, we Anyway, let me just first start with something which was mentioned in the visuals. That is, the Indian Parliament has the representation of women in politics is quite low. In the Indian Parliament, it's about 11%, both the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. And in fact, embarrassingly, we are, in Nepal, the percentage is higher. In Bangladesh, the percentage is higher. We, in fact, we are in the lowest quartile. There are many other, in fact, according to some statistics that I have with me, even countries like Somalia and Iraq have higher representation. Now, you can, of course, all argue that, all parliaments are not the same, and whether you want to equate the political system of India, which is a relatively sophisticated democracy, to that of Somalia and Iraq is another question. But nonetheless, it is an embarrassingly low figure. So if I can ask each of you to comment on why you think this is the case, and more importantly, how this can be changed. Would I first go with Yashodhara Rajeji, if you could?
Eventually, there will be parity. When is that parity going to happen is the moot question. Let me speak about Madhya Pradesh. We have about 165 BJP MLAs in Madhya Pradesh, and we have a representation of about 30-odd MLAs. Even in our cabinet, we have 31 cabinet ministers and we have 4 women ministers. In a way, these comparisons are odious because it's all a question of moving forward. And I do believe that things will improve once you have the women's representation bill come through. And that will also happen under the Modi government. Why do I believe so? Because when a very tricky bill like the Teen Talaq Wala bill came through, and that was hurting the sentiments of many, many people in a particular segment of society, then I think there is a certain willpower with the Prime Minister to bring such a game-changing bill through.
Right. But
I haven't satisfied you.
No.
Okay. So here's the... I'm going to speak more at the state level. We have seen over and over again that this change that the Madhya Pradesh government has brought in, and I'm not here as a spokesperson for the BJP, I'm just saying what I see at the ground level. We have a 55% reservation now that we have put in our departments.
Right.
So every single department in Madhya Pradesh is going to have a 50 to 55 representation of women. That will be a game changer, except for the forest department. At the ground level, we have 50% reservation in the local bodies.
Yeah.
So if we have 51 Jilla Panchayats, we have something like 34 Jilla Panchayat women who are the heads of their panchayats. If we have something like 14 local bodies, we have half, that's half of them are mayors, 7 mayors. We see this constantly at ground level, this change. There used to be a time, because I've been there now long enough, since 98, there used to be a time when the Parshad Patis used to come. That means the husbands of the Parshad. And there used to be Sarpanch Patis.
Yeah.
And there were women like us who said, when we had our meetings, that no, you're the Sarpanch Pati, sorry, please leave. Where is your wife? Oh, she's at home. I said, you send the car and you bring her here. Because she's the one who's elected, and we must make her empowered. You are not the one we are empowering her. So this slow and steady rise in knowledge and learning to understand what my power is at the panchayat level and at the municipal level, where we have not just Nagar Nigams, but we have Nagar Palikas and Nagar Panchayats, which is the lower level. You have seen in the last 5 to 8 years a sudden steadiness of women wanting to be there at the meetings, women opening their mouths and telling you exactly what they're looking at. So this steady rise is there. It's not doomsday. It is there and it is happening. It's just that you have to look at it. It depends on what prism you're looking at it from.
Shazzy, yeah.
So let's just say that we have come a long way, but we have a long way to go. Thank you very much for Economic Times, this great initiative, and to all our lovely audience here, all the leaders. It's great to have these kind of interventions from time to time and take stock of the gender situation in the country. Yes, 11% is abysmally low, at something to feel, I mean, it's a pathetic state of affairs. And Narendra Modi's cabinet itself, there's a 25 representation of women in the cabinet, one. Within the party itself, there is already, since 2006, Sushma Swaraj Committee recommendations were implemented. So within the party, 33% reservations for the party holders is still there. But let's not go into all that. This is still very, very small a figure. Now, when we look at the larger ecosystem, at the larger patriarchal structure of a country, I would say patriarchal most generally and misogynistic also in parts, I really think we have a lot more to do. And it is whatever is happening around you, whether it's crimes against women, whether it's the socio-economic indicators, where women's education is concerned, primary school rates are concerned, female feticide is concerned, dowry deaths are concerned. If you look at the larger ecosystem, a lot more needs to be done. Then I will place a rider as well. Is it the responsibility only of women leaders to work for women's upliftment? Do we not kind of let off the men? Because it is gender parity, gender justice, gender equality is mandated in the Constitution as a responsibility for everybody, all the lawmakers. So let's not let our lawmakers get away. It is everybody's responsibility, and I don't have to work just for women. I have to work for the marginalized sections, men and women. So Handsome is what Handsome does. They are very pro-women, you know, not patriarchal politicians who are men. And they're very women, and they're women who are repository of patriarchal power. So that divide has to be there. Handsome is, after all, what handsome does.
I think that what we are seeing in terms of these numbers is actually a reflection of the society we live in. While in many ways, many of us who are on stage here, many of the audience who are sitting on the other side, all of us come from a position of privilege. I think there would be very few of us who have had to struggle to make sure that we get appropriate, adequate health care. There's none of us who would probably have had to struggle to get admission into schools, to think about whether we can stay in school, to think about whether we can go to college, whether we can actually do a job. But even those of us who are privileged as women in India do face a lot of struggles. We face struggles in the workplace, to become partners in organizations, to wonder whether is this the appropriate way for women to behave in a workplace and whether I would be taken seriously by my male colleagues. So we are a very deeply unequal society, and I think that this deep inequality in our society is what reflects in our political space as well. But I do think that really as people who are addressing this question of the gender gap, political participation and the presence of women in decision-making really has to be front, up, and center if we are looking to reduce any of the gender gaps what we are talking about, be it a gap in terms of education access, be it a gap in terms of women in the workforce, because finally these decisions are made by politicians, by people who are in decision-making roles. And until we can crack this piece, until we can actually get women in positions of power where they can make decisions, I don't think that many of the other pieces can actually be bridged. 2-3 things though I would say, how do we bridge this gap? I think first of all, a very important piece, even in terms of policies, is actually education. I think that access to education is the first thing that would give women the ability to break through many, many ceilings at different levels. Number 2, I would actually, taking on to what Yashudhara has been saying about Panchayati Raj, etc., I think involving women in decision-making roles, even at the local level, is extremely important. I think let's not think that it's only reservation in the parliament that's going to bring about this change. And it's very interesting to see how even at micro levels, and I'll share a small example from Delhi, we have been empowering what are school management committees, community participation models in our government schools, and there you have a mandatory 50% reservation for women. And you see a lot of women participating who probably never even stepped out of their homes before. And I had one mother tell me, who lives very close to the school in an unauthorized colony on the 5th floor of an illegal construction, who has never been to school, who's probably never even stepped out of her house, tell me that since I've come on the school management committee, every morning when I'm working in the house, when I'm cleaning the house, I step out into the balcony and see whether the students have come on time. Then when I'm cooking sometime later in the day, I look out of my balcony and say whether there's proper discipline in the school. And if there's anything that's wrong, I just go down the building into the school next to my house and make sure that everything is fine. So just this small example of a woman who might never have stepped out of her home, who may not be educated, but yet is stepping into the public domain to make a difference. So that is number 2. And number 3, as far as the women's reservation bill goes, I mean, I personally have nothing against men, but the fact of the matter is that any struggle for rights for any group has to be done by that group themselves. I mean, I do not think that finally in the last resort, it's men who are going to push for the women's reservation bill. It will have to be women. It's almost like saying that were there Britishers who used to think about Indians' interests? Yes, of course there were Britishers who used to think about interests of Indians. But finally it is Indians who had to lead the freedom struggle and get independence for this country. And I think that if the women's reservation bill has to be passed, I think it is women from all party lines, and I think it's women from all walks of life who will have to organize together and strongly lobby and push for it. Because what we have seen with the women's reservation bill is a classic example of everyone pledging their support on the face of it, but no one actually doing anything. So until women are going to demand the women's reservation bill, until the politicians know that you are not going to get the vote of this 500 million, till you pass this women's reservation bill, the bill is not going to come.
May I ask you to don your BJP spokesperson or spokes hat and respond to that? I mean, it's been almost 3.5 years now into the government, and
Sure. So it was Atal Bihari Vajpayee who reintroduced it in '98, and it was reintroduced 3 times, every time by a BJP member. And as you know, how the parliament has been functioning or the obstructions have been taking place, it was Sushma Swaraj, it was that rare moment in the parliament. We saw Brinda Karat and Sushma Swaraj as well as Sonia Gandhi working hand in hand. So obviously it will be the women because they are the stakeholders, so to speak. And it's got to happen sooner than later. So whether it's Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, or actually talking about gender parity, or Ujjwala Yojana, or actual representation, actually having a defense minister as a woman defense minister, the Prime Minister and the government has been at the forefront of it. But I just want to tell the audience about my personal experience. You know, also being a Muslim candidate at a given point of time, I went to ask for votes. And this I got reminded hearing my other two co-panelists. And there was this Maulana, this very senior Muslim cleric whose house I went to. And he says, why are you doing this? Where are your children? You should be looking after them. Why are you asking for votes? It is not your job to come out there and ask for votes. It is not a woman's place to be in public spaces like this. And I felt very, it was really depressing to hear that. And with a very small face, I returned. And I said, no, you must support me, and this is important. And I came out, and there were these women inside, all in the burqas and the hijab. And one of the little girls came running out, caught me ahead. He says, my mom wants to talk to you, she's here. And the daughter-in-law of this cleric and her little daughter, who was 10, they actually asked me, and they said, don't listen to our grandfather. He's talking a lot of nonsense. You please go. We want you to win. Make sure there is a bus service closer to the house so we have better access to not just school, but even to go to the market. So to know what women want is also something that we have to get to. And I think women's reservation definitely is important. But again, to have a creamy layer, like you've seen with the OBC reservation, to have the same old families and their own, whether there's the daughters-in-law or daughters, is not the idea. The idea is to have strong women grassroots leaders who don't have godfathers, who don't have the backing of big families, to go out there to cultivate them. And for that, the overall ecosystem has to be encouraged, and basic safety has to be provided, and then education and other opportunities.
Sure. If I can ask, yeah, sorry.
It's actually also about, as Atishi said, education. The more we try to percolate education down to the lowest levels, people and women are ready to understand. Women are ready to come out. We talk about this Ujjwala Yojana that the Prime Minister did. There are so many areas where we talk about the BJP government that it hasn't done this and it's that, and be scared and don't do this. It's not that. Just see the very issues that the Prime Minister has brought through in his 3 years or 4 years. India is a behemoth. Even after 5 years, whatever you've set out to do as targets, you cannot do, because the country is so large. It has such a huge population. And within that time, at my grassroots level, because I'm an MLA, I'm not a member of parliament, I have the lowest of constituencies where everything is rural. And the women today who have Ujjwala Yojana, Bodhi, where they're given the gas chula and the gas cylinder. Why was it done? It was done because women are all the time in the kitchen. In the rural areas, they're going to cut the wood. That takes 2 hours. Then they come back. Then they put on the fire. All the smoke goes into their eyes. Then they finally get there. I know you're having a hard time with time. But this is important. Every time we have given the Ujjwala Yojana in my constituency, I make sure that I speak to every single woman to tell her and ask her feedback. What is this going to do to you? She says, I'm going to have more time for my family. I'm going to have more time for myself. The moment they say more time for myself, then you know that they're starting to think. Yes. So this attitudinal change doesn't come just from the men. That'll have to come, because it's your Me Too moment like in Hollywood. There will be that movement, and I see it at the grassroots level, that women do want to come out and want to be doing something for myself. At the same time as you have this parochial outlook that will have to change amongst the men, look at the women. I mean, my mother today, when you look back on her life, she was the Rajmata, great, came from a privileged house. But she actually was a civil servant's daughter that came into our house. And when she started her political life in 62, or the year my father died in 61, there were no other women except for Mrs. Gandhi. And she took on the mantle. First she was in the Congress party, then she went to the BJP, and she took on the women's rights for women in the BJP. And the BJP accepted her. People always say, oh, right-wing party, you know, don't like women. That's not true. She was the vice president of her party, and she was at a she proved herself. And then comes the parochialism, because I remember when I was wanting to work with her in a constituency, and I was already working at the national level as an equestrian, she would keep telling me, अब मैं क्या करूं? अब तुम हड्डी तोड़ोगी तो फिर मैं शादी तुम्हारी कैसे करूंगी? So was that the be all and the end all for even people that were educated to tell us that shadi, that's the wedding, you have to have, be a mother, you have to have your children and do whatever. So that whole system has to pass. It has to be a watershed.
So would you say that things have, you've been in politics for now long, would you say that things have improved over the years?
100%. But we still have to fight. People think that I come from a privileged background. I don't. Because I've had to fight every single way. That privilege of being Rajmata's daughter hangs so heavy on my shoulders that when you go out, people are expecting you to be in a box. And when you don't do it, then they say, oh. On the other hand, the Rajmata did only this. Now you have to start doing that plus that. How do you do it? So it's a constant work in progress. And you have to fight. Even at my level, I have to fight to just keep my space and keep myself going and keep myself motivated. But as Atishi said, it has to be a movement. It will be a movement because all the women in this room are thinking. And all these women in the room will go back and talk to their friends. And that will start the movement for more proactiveness. I'm not talking of us not being active. I'm just talking about being us so proactive. We have Naina Lal Kidwai here. We have Madam Faruqi here from Afghanistan. These are all women who are role models for all of us who all the time fight for survival.
Right. In a new political party such as AAP, are things a little bit different? Are things easier? Is it easier for women?
I believe they are. I think that some of the stories that I hear from colleagues who are in other parties, I think it is easier when you are not struggling against many patriarchal structures, when you're working in a political space that has a lot of much younger people, who has a lot of professional people. But I think that the challenges in terms of a woman in politics do remain the same. I think that we are, as I said, living in a deeply unequal society. And I think that the expectations of what a woman has to be, even when you go out into the public domain, when you are out meeting people, definitely do exist. I would like to close up with sort of repeating the same thing that I said earlier. I think there are so many educated, empowered, visionary women sitting in this room, and men also. And I do think that ensuring women's participation in the public domain, ensuring women's participation in decision-making, ensuring women's participation in politics really needs to be the centerpiece that many of us need to come together and lobby for. That we need to organize and ensure that women get that space in politics and in decision-making, because that is what is going to change our education, our healthcare, our economic opportunities. Till women are in decision-making roles, I think this gender gap is going to stay.
Shazia?
Well, I would like to request all of you to really be more proactive. I know a lot of you think politics is a dirty word, is a bad word. It is a gutter out there. And I've been a journalist most of my life, and I joined the Anna Hazare movement simply because I thought I had to do something about the way things were. So it's so important because politics really is the heart of the matter. It is where policies are made. It is where policies are implemented. It affects our lives directly, as in what the commodities prices are, as in what policies are, as to how we lead our lives, how we conduct ourselves, what is accountability of our government servants, and so on and so forth. So my only prayer, so to speak, to all of you would be that whichever party, wherever, what political engagement, mobilization is really important. It's just not all right to be an enraged citizen. It's good to be an engaged citizen. Go out there, see what's happening, and hold your MLAs, MPs accountable time to time. Please. That makes sense.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think
we're so held accountable. It's not funny.
Thank you so much, panelists, for that very invigorating address. Thank you for showing us that as much as it is a grassroots movement, it really does start at the top. very invigorating and inspiring for the youth of this country, including me. Before we move on, from the world stage to India's hinterlands, our next panel brings together three outstanding women who are championing women empowerment at the grassroots level. To talk more about the role of women in India's economic growth, I'm pleased to invite the Vice President of the World Bank for South Asia, who leads relations with 8 countries, including India, and oversees lending operations and trust-funded projects worth more than 10 billion a year. Please welcome Annette Dixon.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here today to talk about India's economic growth and development and how women's economic participation can actually support that goal. I want to start firstly by acknowledging our mothers and grandmothers whose hard work made it possible for us all to be here today. I'd also like to pay tribute to our sisters who over the years have fought for the rights that we enjoy today. I'm very proud that my country, New Zealand, is the first country in the world that gained the right for women to vote. And this year we celebrate 125 years since women first gained suffrage. Over the last couple of decades, an impressive 133 million Indians have been pulled out of poverty. That's an achievement that India and the world can all be proud of. But that result could have been even more dramatic if greater numbers of women were contributing to the workforce. It's very important, I think, to start by acknowledging that Indian women work very hard. We know that traditionally they've worked in the home and in agriculture, and they carry huge loads in their families. But since, as of 2012, only 27% of Indian women had a job or were actively looking for one, and that compares with 79% of men. More worryingly, in the last decade or so, over 20 million Indian women have dropped out of the workforce. That's the equivalent of Sri Lanka's population. And it seems that, in part, India's rapid urbanization may have contributed to this result, as women's jobs in the rural areas have been decreasing. Not enough rural women have been able to make the transition to working in urban areas. By any measure, this gap is large and worryingly widening. India ranks as 120 amongst 131 countries in female participation rates. And also worryingly, rates of gender-based violence remain unacceptably high here and elsewhere in the region. It's very hard to develop an inclusive and sustainable way when half of the population is not fully participating. India's women contribute 17% of GDP, which is less than half of the global average. If you compare that 17%, in China it's 40%. We believe that India could boost its economic growth rates by at least 1.5 percentage points if only 50% of women joined the workforce. It's not to say that there isn't progress and success. More girls are participating in education than ever before. And for many women, as family incomes have risen, they've been able to leave the workforce. But India must change this direction if, in fact, it's to stay on path to a fully inclusive and developed society, and if it's to reach its full potential. So what will it take to reverse this? Firstly, valuing girls and women is a critical factor in making societies more prosperous. We know that women's economic empowerment is highly connected to poverty reduction, because women tend to actually invest their earnings more in their families' development and in their communities. The intergenerational benefits of women working in the workforce are profound. For its part, the World Bank Group ensures that the programs that we support in countries are structured to focus on greater economic participation for women. For example, here in India, one of the iconic things in India, I think, is the mass movements of women who participate in self-help groups. We have invested over $3 billion in the past 15 years to support the state governments in the poorest parts of India to empower rural, poor women through these self-help groups. Through these programs that the state governments have supported, more than 45 million poor women have been able to access skills, markets, and business development services. Some of them have gone on to become successful entrepreneurs and have become an inspiration for others. These programs have been evaluated, and the evidence clearly shows that these women in the self-help groups experience greater food security for themselves and their families, better access to finance, and higher incomes. Their incomes on average are 25% higher, the household income, through these programs. And many of these women have been empowered to take on leadership roles in their villages and communities. Bravely, they are stopping gender-based violence and open defecation in their villages. Also, the Skill Mission of India, which we are supporting, not only provides women with relevant skills that is sought by employers, but also ensure that training programs are sensitive to their needs. We also are helping through financing safe public transport and flexible schedules and childcare support. In Jharkhand, we are supporting adolescent girls to help them complete their secondary education and providing mentoring services for them to succeed in the job market. However, all these programs and interventions alone are not sufficient. Research shows that even women that have completed skills programs and get jobs still will tend to drop out of the workforce when they have their first child in response to family pressures. Changing the social norms around marriage, work, and household duties has to be an important part of this agenda. We need to spark the interest of young girls in subjects like science and mathematics and convince them that they are just as capable as boys and that they too can build careers in engineering, scientific research, IT, and all the fields that are in demand from prospective employers. We must also raise our sons to respect girls and women and to make it clear that there is a zero tolerance for gender-based violence. In the home, we need to see families supporting their girls as future professionals. Household workload for women and girls is heavy, but these responsibilities can be divided between men and women, and men can do more to support women. It is an opportune time also, I think, to look at the legislation framework and policies that act as deterrents to women entering and staying in the labour market. fostering the creation of better jobs, providing for childcare and elder care, and ensuring safe mobility to and from work can remove significant structural barriers for women to access employment. Employers need to walk the talk and commit to supporting diversity in the workplace by hiring women and paying them the same wages as they pay for men for the similar jobs. We also need safe public transport and zero tolerance for sexual harassment in the workplace and in the community. The private sector should take a leading role in expanding women's share of employment and firm ownership in emerging industries. We can accelerate progress by working together. Gender-focused planning is more effective when it's incorporated in everything we do. Today, the World Bank thinks about gender-based development in all of the areas that we support in different countries in the world and try to incorporate these into the design of government programs and their implementation. Over the last couple of years, I've had the opportunity here in Mumbai to ride the suburban train system. You haven't lived until you've done this. Here I've had the opportunity to meet a cross-section of Mumbai's working women. Here in Mumbai, more women are working than anywhere else in India. These are in jobs in banking and finance, as well as working in markets and fishing. Each woman I've spoken to her in her own way has been an invaluable part of this great big bustling city and contributing to its dynamism and its vibrancy. The women I've spoken to appreciate that the new trains on the suburban rail system have given them greater speed in getting to work, more comfortable seating and better ventilation. Most importantly, there are women's carriages and women's trains, but they want a lot more to be done to improve their connectivity between their stations and their often distant homes. Recognising these challenges, we are working here with the government of Maharashtra to ensure that the future development of the public transport system in Mumbai addresses even more carefully the gender-based needs at the core of the design. I've also seen a substantial difference in in what a safe working environment can provide for women in Tamil Nadu. There, I've talked with young women who are working in manufacturing and in the garment sector, far from their village homes. They have become the main breadwinners for their often impoverished families. Many girls are now helping their family members with education and other expenses. They've been able to do these jobs because they have been able to live in women's hostels, they've been able to access safe transport, and they've been able to access childcare for their children. These are many examples of the kinds of things that the government is doing to try and turn around the trend that we see. Some of these promising signs are the government's programs for skills development, subsidised loans for businesses led by women, and the recent legislation which doubles maternity leave and requires childcare facilities in companies that employ more than 50 people. If these programs are implemented, then these policies could remove some of the most difficult barriers that women face and offer significant boost to India's economy. But as these examples and anecdotes show, success will hinge on collaboration between all of the stakeholders, ranging from government ministries at all levels, to education providers, to public sector and private sector employers, down to the actions of all of us here. In the end, Indian women will have to play the key role in claiming this space in India's workforce. Personally, I will continue to advocate for them, and I know that you will all join me. Let's all pledge today to increase women's participation in the workforce, and that will help us to realise a higher level of growth and development for India, and an India that is more inclusive and more sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Annette, not only for the World Bank's incredible support to India, for the incredible work that they are doing here, but for also telling us how much the change is multidisciplinary and comes from within us on so many different levels. To introduce 3 outstanding women who are championing empowerment in India at the grassroots, I would like to call upon to open our next session, Unstoppable, Stories of Social Change, Niharika Pandey from the News Partnership Team at Facebook.
Hi, everybody. My name is Niharika. I work with the News Partnerships team at Facebook, and we're very happy to be here today, and thank you all for joining us for this session. So at Facebook, our mission is to bring the world closer together and to build communities. And women often are at the heart of these communities, and technology is giving them a voice to not just be louder and stronger, but also make sure they can propel others around them. Be it with programs like She Means Business and She Leads Tech, we're ensuring that we are not only encouraging participation in business and tech, but also making sure that they advance as thought leaders in the space that they're in and can really rally people around their causes. Over the next 20 minutes, we're going to hear from 3 very diverse set of women. These are women who have faced challenges, who have overcome those challenges and really championed their cause, and are now today creating deep social impact in the spaces that they've chosen. They've come from all across the country and are here with us today, so I would really like you to give them a really, really loud and warm round of applause. Just before we start, thank you so much. Just before that, I also want to just take a minute to talk a little bit about them while we will hear the story in their own words. And this is really a session for them to share their journey with us. I will just take a minute to talk a little bit about the diversity that we will be seeing on stage. We have Kirti, who's come in from Chennai, who will be joining us as a speaker, and she will be talking about the work she has done around violence, gender-based violence. Just a small note here is that Kirti herself suffered a personal loss yesterday, and with her permission, I'm sharing this. But just keeping with the theme of being unstoppable, she's still joined us here today because this is an important platform for her to share this story. We will have Natasha, who is coming from a village right on the borders of Rajasthan and Punjab, and bringing a very important grassroots community voice into Nariman Point, and making sure that she's sharing what's really happening at a local level and bringing that for all of us. And finally, we'll have Pragya, who is going to be sharing with us her story of change. And what's most interesting is for any of us who've met her is that she's an extremely optimistic voice, where it's not just about her life, which is a mission, but also a message to all of us. So again, thank you all for joining us, and really urge you to sit back and just enjoy the stories and join them in their journeys.
Thank you, Niharika. I'd like to now invite on stage the first of these 3 path breakers, these fabulous women. Our first grassroots heroine is Kirti Jaikumar. Kirti is an activist. Yes, a round of applause would be lovely. Kirti is an activist, an artist, an entrepreneur, and a writer who founded and runs the Red Elephant Foundation, a civilian peace-building initiative that works for gender equality through storytelling, advocacy, digital interventions. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome Kirti Jaikumar.
I sleep for a few hours every night, sometimes for 2, sometimes for 4. But on the night of the 14th of May 2016, I went to sleep at 10 p.m. only to wake up the next morning at 6 a.m. Something very unlike me. And in that time, I had 16 missed calls and 31 messages left for me on my WhatsApp from the same person, a friend of mine who was trying to escape a domestic violence situation. Now, this young woman had gotten married in the early part of 2015 and had lived all her life in the city of Chennai before she had been whisked away to London after marriage. She knew nothing about the city she was living in except for the route from her house to the railway station because her husband would allow her only that much exposure. Day in and day out, he would beat her, verbally abuse her, deprive her of money and necessities. Calls back home were rationed and only under his supervision. She couldn't tell anyone what she was going through. He would keep her locked in the house every time he left it. But on that night, because he had rushed away on some urgent obligations, he had left the door unlocked, and she had found her escape route. Her immediate option was to reach out to friends and family back in India, but as luck would have it, being a weeknight, all of us were asleep. She didn't want to alert her parents at that time of the night because they were both cardiac patients, and waking them up with that kind of news didn't feel right. Not getting anywhere with her phone calls, she pulled out her SIM card, snapped it, left her phone behind, found whatever money she could in the house, and left the house. Went right up to the railway station. Bought herself a ticket, got on a train, and just sat there. She went route after route after route until someone realized that she was in distress and led her to a temporary shelter. The next morning, she managed to get in touch with her parents, tell them what had happened, and now she lives a peaceful, happy life in India, away from the abusive marriage. What happened that night led me to feel horribly guilty. A friend was trying to reach out to me, a survivor. I call myself a person who works for survivors' rights, and I wasn't there for the girl when she needed me. And it also made me think deeper. What if, just like her, there were many other survivors in situations like this, caught like a deer in the headlights? Where do I go? What do I do? How do I reach out? And that guilt kicked me into action. 10 volunteers from my organization and I sat together to map resources across 197 countries, across 11 verticals. And by the end of 2 months, we had 5,000 organizations ready for display, which we put across in an Ushahidi-based crowd map. But we also realized that a web-based application can only go so far. What if a bystander on the street sees a situation of violence? How are they going to access a web-based app on their phone? What if a survivor just doesn't have access to a computer? The need then became to use tech through a mobile phone to get these resources across. I reached out to coders, I reached out to companies, and although most of them volunteered their time, it wasn't meant to be. I realized if I was going to have to get this done, I couldn't wait around. I would have to do this myself. I'm a lawyer by profession. I left computer science way back in 10th grade when a computer science teacher very kindly told me, "Beta, tumse na ho paega." And that month, I set out to completely debunk what he had left in my mind. I taught myself code. I went online. I spent a month crying through it all. At one point, code seemed to jump at me like a 3D movie, sometimes screaming expletives at that. But I managed. By the end of it, the app was ready. And with the help of 2 of my senior members at the Red Elephant Foundation, we fittingly named it Sahas. Because you see, in Hindi, Sahas means courage. Courage because it's an act of courage on part of a survivor to reclaim her life after violence, to make it more than just about violence. Courage because it is an act of courage for a bystander not to stand by or shrug and walk away, but to rise to the occasion and support a survivor. Courage because one woman with one laptop had one big, audacious dream and chased it. At some point in the journey, a friend of mine reached out and asked me to pull up resources and share it with her through Facebook on a messenger, because that was the only private platform she had. So that was my next kick. I taught myself to build a chat bot using Facebook Messenger as the platform, and that bot now helps survivors around the world by pulling up resources just with a push of a button. Today, Sahas has over 40,000 organizations that are fully verified and are placed for a survivor's needs anywhere in the world, across 197 countries. I dream of a day when a tool like Sahas would no longer be necessary. But until that day comes, I hope that the tool helps survivors and builds active bystanders, one life at a time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kirti, for your brilliance and your great enterprise. Our second speaker, Nitasha Rakesh Sehag, transcended caste barriers to head the Panchayat in Haryana's Sirsa village, Khari Sureran. Using technology to successfully empower women, she was recently promoted to Party District President of the Women's Wing of the BJP. Please welcome Nitasha Rakesh Sehag.
हेलो, अभी मैं आपको बताना चाहूँगी मेरा जन्म शहीद उधम सिंह की जन्मभूमि जिला सुनाम में हुआ है और मैं अपने आप को बहुत सौभाग्यशाली समझती हूँ कि मेरा जन्म एक ऐसी जन्मस्थली में हुआ जहाँ एक शहीद ने जन्म लिया है। लेकिन मेरे जीवन में जो सबसे बड़ा मोड़ आया वो हरियाणा के अंदर अंतरजातीय विवाह के दौरान आया और उसी हरियाणा की तस्वीर शायद आप लोगों के दिमाग में खापों के तुगल की फरमानों और घूंघट में रखने वाली महिलाओं के रूप में है। लेकिन आज इसी मंच से मैं आपकी उस सोच को तोड़ना चाहूँगी, क्योंकि मेरी इस सोच को उन्हीं ग्रामीणों ने पुख्ता किया है कि अंतरजातीय विवाह हमारे आज जाति पाति में समाज जो बंट रहा है उसको रोकने का एक बहुत बड़ा तरीका हो सकता है। मैं आज उसी हरियाणा में जिला सिरसा में राजस्थान और हरियाणा की सीमा पर सटे हुए गांव खारी सुरेरा में रहती हूं और घर के सभी काम झाड़ू पोछा इवन देन की हमारी हरियाणा में बोला जाता है भैंसों का गोबर, वो मैं खुद ये सारे काम करती हूं। और वहीं से मैं अपने एक गैस एजेंसी का संचालन भी देखती हूं और रोज़ अपने गांव से 8 किलोमीटर दूर आती हूं। यहीं पे जो महिलाएं मुझसे मिली और जब वो मुझसे अपनी प्रॉब्लम शेयर करती तो कई बार ऐसा होता कि मैं कोशिश करती कि उनकी इन सब समस्याओं का हल निकाल पाऊँ, पर ऐसा नहीं हो पाता था। जब मैंने ये सब कुछ अपने पति राकेश जी से शेयर किया जो पेशे से एक जर्नलिस्ट हैं, तो उन्होंने मुझे इसके लिए राजनीति में आने की सलाह दी। मैंने ब्लॉक समिति के इलेक्शनों में अपना भाग्य आजमाया और 3 पुरुषों के मुकाबले ओपन सीट पर मुझे पूरे जिला में सबसे ज़्यादा वोटों से जनता ने प्यार बख्शा और मुझे विजय बनाया। और मेरी इसी मेहनत और लगन को देखते हुए भाजपा ने मुझे डिस्ट्रिक्ट प्रेसिडेंट महिला मोर्चा और जिला कष्ट निवारण समिति के सदस्य के रूप में बहुत सारी जिम्मेवारियां सौंपी। अब इन जिम्मेवारियों को आगे बढ़ाते हुए मैंने पूरे जिला में जाना शुरू किया, जहां मुझसे सैकड़ों महिलाएं मिली, पर जो महिलाएं मुझसे मिली वो ग्रामीण रूट की महिलाएं थी। उनके लिए मेरे पास सैकड़ों किलोमीटर तक चल के आना संभव नहीं था। तो इसके लिए मैंने व्हाट्सएप, फेसबुक और ट्विटर को ज़रिया बनाया। मैंने आम जनता के अंदर मेरा व्हाट्सएप नंबर शेयर करना शुरू किया और ऐसी ही मैं कुछ घटनाएं आपसे शेयर करना चाहूँगी जिन्होंने मुझे प्राउड फील करवाने का मौका दिया। मुझे पिछली गर्मियों की बात है, फेसबुक के ज़रिए एक मैसेज आया कि कैसे एक सरकारी आंगनवाड़ी केंद्र में बिल्कुल छोटे छोटे बच्चे बिना पानी और बिना बिजली के रह रहे हैं। मैंने वहाँ जाया और जब जाके वहाँ पे देखा तो वाकई स्थिति इतनी खस्ता हालात में थी कि जिस गर्मी में हम लोग बाहर निकलने का नहीं सोचते, उस गर्मी में वो छोटे छोटे बच्चे बिना पानी और बिना बिजली के कैसे रह रहे थे। मैंने तुरंत उनकी जिला अधिकारी को वहाँ बुलाया और जैसे ही मैंने फेसबुक और व्हाट्सएप के ज़रिए उनकी इन समस्याओं को, उन बच्चों को शेयर करना शुरू किया, तो मुझे गर्व होता है आपको ये बताते हुए कि पूरे ज़िले की आंगनवाड़ी केंद्रों का जांच करवाया गया और उनको उनकी स्थिति को सुधारने के लिए हमारी सरकार ने बहुत अच्छे कदम उठाने शुरू किए। और ऐसी ही एक घटना जो आज भी मुझे मेरी आत्मा तक झकझोर के रख देती है, ऐसी एक घटना है जो मैं आप लोगों को बताना चाहूँगी। पिछले महिला दिवस की बात है, मेरा जनसंपर्क के लिए किसी गांव में जाना हुआ, जहां मुझे पता चला कि एक दादी ने अपनी सिर्फ 5 साल की एक पोती को, जो कि एक स्पेशल चाइल्ड भी थी, गरम चिमटे से उसके गुप्त अंगों को जला दिया। और ऐसा उसने क्यों किया? सिर्फ एक पोता पाने की लालसा में, एक तांत्रिक के कहने पे किया। तो जब मैंने ये चीज़ को उठाया, सारा मामला महिला आयोग की चेयरमैन तक पहुंचा। हम लोग महिला आयोग की चेयरमैन को लेके, पुलिस अधिकारियों को लेके जब वहां पहुंचे, तो मैं आपको स्थिति बता नहीं सकती कि उस माँ और उस बच्ची के क्या हाल थे। और मेरी आत्मा ने मुझे ये सोचने पे मजबूर कर दिया कि जिस माँ को हम ममता कहते हैं, वो एक दादी अपनी पोती के साथ ऐसा कैसे कर सकती है। आज भी जब उस घटना को मैं याद करती हूँ तो मैं आपको बता नहीं सकती कि मेरी आंखों में से आंसू रुकने का नाम नहीं लेते। लेकिन यहां मैं आपसे ये जरूर शेयर करूंगी कि अगर हमें इस पुरुष प्रधान समाज में अपने अस्तित्व को कायम करना है तो, और किसी भी देश को अगर तरक्की के उस शिखर पर पहुंचना है तो उसकी जो ये महिलाएं हैं, जब तक कंधे से कंधा मिलाकर साथ नहीं चलेंगी तो वो देश तरक्की नहीं कर सकता। एक देश की तरक्की इन महिलाओं की तरक्की के साथ है। और कोई भी महिला अगर सशक्त होना चाहती है तो उसको खुद के लिए खड़ा होना पड़ेगा। खड़ा होने के लिए हमें BBC बनना पड़ेगा। BBC, बी बोल्ड फॉर चेंज। अंत में मैं एक उद्घोष जरूर लगवाऊंगी आपसे, भारत माता की वंदे। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Niharika certainly is BBC. Very inspiring for all those who didn't understand entirely what she was saying. She really is a pioneer and an example of how to use social media to empower not just herself but everyone around her and really go for real change. Finally, the last speaker from these three incredible women is Pragya Singh, an acid attack survivor turned activist and social worker who's fighting for providing relief and rehabilitation to other acid attack and burn survivors. She's founder and secretary of Ati Jeevan Foundation. Please welcome Pragya Singh.
There is that one moment in our lives which changes everything, makes us who we are, and breaks us, or breaks us who we would end up becoming into. I have seen a lot of people respond to such situations in their lives. For some people, going through a terrible illness can make them appreciate life better. Or there are some who, having lost dear ones, can lose all hope as well. My story is different. I have had a series of incidents which were considered life-changing until, of course, the real one happened. As a teenager, I broke my nose after a stone hit me while I was on train. This could have changed my life. I found passion in my career and got married to the most wonderful guy I have ever known. These, of course, were life-changing moments. But none of them came close to that unfortunate event which happened later in my life, when a jilted man, in an act of vengeance, threw acid on me. It was the darkest phase in my life, darker than most vivid imagination and most frightening nightmares. I can say I found my courage in those numerous surgeries I underwent, with the pain and the agony. Slowly, I endured it with love and blessing of my family and friends, and I believe God had repaid me to the stern test He put me into by blessing me with my two beautiful daughters. I was slowly getting back to life, but something deep within my heart was not at ease. I was not at peace with just fixing my own life and moving on. I had to do something for others who were left alone to suffer in darkness. And thus Ati Jeevan came into existence some 5 years back. Ati Jeevan, with the help of several doctors, volunteers, and philanthropists, has been able to touch and rejuvenate lives of more than 200 acid attack survivors till now. Ati Jeevan's key focus area includes facilitating reconstructive surgeries and non-surgical cosmetic procedures, counseling survivors for best personalized treatment, empowering survivors by educational and vocational training, and organizing exhibitions to sell the products made by the survivors across the country. I also campaign for promotion of skin donation using help of various social media. Skin donation can play an essential role in treatment of burn patients, but many are oblivious about it. It can give an acid attack or burn survivors another lease of life. As per an estimate, we can save up to 50% more patients by donating the skin. Due to Atijeevan's sustained campaigns, more than 50 skin donors have come forward and registered with skin banks in Mumbai, Bangalore, and Chennai. Reviving life of an acid burn survivor is a multifaceted challenge. Providing support to for the surgeries is only job half done. After they recover from their rehabilitation is the next challenge. Using help of technology and social media, Atijeevan conducts several online and offline skill training program and workshops to equip the survivors with prowess to find a respectable and sustainable source of livelihood. Sensitizing society about plight of acid survivors is another area where Atijeevan plays a key role. It strives to give the survivors a fair and equal chance to make their place in the society by becoming a bridge between the survivors and the society, so that the survivors can travel the journey of their life with the same ease, comfort, respect, and opportunities as any common man gets. Today, I am proud of my accomplishments and contribution to society through Atijeevan. The only thing that keeps me driving is my simple thought. I'm not a victim. I'm an ambassador. I have to fight for others who support them at this moment. Here I stand as a proof. I am not what happened to me. I am not my face. I am what I make of myself, and I am a story with a happy ending. Thank you.
Thank you to Pragya for sharing so courageously her own story. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it once again for these three brave hearts. Kirti, Natasha, and Pragya, and the impressive work that they are doing. Join us now for a short tea break. I think everyone is just about ready for one. Tea is served outside in the foyer. We shall reconvene in 15 minutes.